In our discourse today, we shall embark upon an examination of Freemasonry, an institution defined by a profound and persistent duality. We will investigate the chasm that separates its internal world, a complex system of philosophy and symbolism oriented towards individual enlightenment, from its external perception, a history shadowed by centuries of suspicion, accusation, and outright condemnation. This is an exploration of the esoteric ideal versus the exoteric gaze.
At the very heart of this subject lies a fundamental and deeply polarizing question. Is Freemasonry to be understood as a structured path toward moral and intellectual self-improvement, a journey of personal transformation? Or is it, as its detractors have long maintained, a clandestine fraternity, a secret society conspiring against the established order of religion, state, and society? This is the central conflict, the dialectic that has shaped its history and continues to define its place in the world.
These two images encapsulate the antithetical narratives perfectly. On one side, we see the rich, layered symbolism of the Masonic tradition, the square and compasses, tools of the builder repurposed as allegorical guides for moral conduct. On the other, we are confronted with the raw animosity of history, a page from an 18th century anti-Masonic tract. The text itself is a torrent of vitriol, accusing the fraternity of all manner of heresy and debauchery. Here, the inner world of allegory meets the outer world of accusation. To comprehend Freemasonry with any degree of seriousness, one must first endeavor to understand it on its own terms. Therefore, let us begin by examining its internal philosophical framework. We shall see that it is structured not as a political or religious creed, but as an allegorical journey of the self, one that mirrors an ancient and universal pattern of human storytelling. The key to unlocking this inner world is a concept known as the monomyth, or the hero's journey, a structural pattern identified by the comparative mythologist Joseph Campbell. Through his extensive research, Campbell discerned a universal template underlying myths across all cultures, which consists of three essential stages: the departure from the known world, the initiation into a realm of trials and wonders, and finally, the return, transformed by the experience. This archetypal pattern, Campbell argued, is not merely about telling stories. It is a blueprint for psychological and spiritual transformation, a blueprint adopted with great precision by the Masonic initiatory process. This diagram provides a visualization of the monomyth's universality and its deep historical roots. At its core lies the tripartite journey: departure, initiation, return. But observe the traditions from which it draws its symbolic power. Ancient mythology, the esoteric wisdom of Gnosticism, the transformative art of alchemy. Freemasonry did not invent this structure. Rather, it synthesized these disparate threads of Western esotericism into a coherent ritual system. This map, then, is not merely a literary device. It is a psychological chart for the profound change a candidate is intended to undergo.
And here we see the direct correspondence between Campbell's monomyth and the Masonic rite of passage. The first stage is departure. The candidate symbolically separates himself from the outer or profane world to enter the sacred space of the lodge. The second stage is initiation. He undergoes a series of ritual trials and is exposed to philosophical lessons designed to provoke introspection and enlightenment. And the third and final stage is the return. He re-enters society, no longer the same person, but one who is, in theory, a more thoughtful, virtuous, and complete individual.
A most potent and concrete example of this process is found in the Chamber of Reflection. Prior to his initiation, the candidate is sequestered in a dark, isolated room. There, he is surrounded by stark symbols of mortality, a human skull, bones, and hourglass, and is instructed to contemplate his own finitude. This is a ritual of symbolic death, a necessary precursor to a spiritual rebirth. It is the Masonic parallel to the hero's descent into the underworld, the belly of the whale in Campbell's schema. It is a physical ordeal designed to trigger a profound psychological reorientation.
What then is the ultimate aim of this arduous journey? Herein lies a critical philosophical distinction. Masonic thought does not seek to forge a new man, an ideal frequently associated with totalitarian ideologies where a perfected human model is imposed externally by the state. Such an ideal creates a dogmatic and artificial elite. Instead, the Masonic objective is the completed man, an individualistic pursuit wherein each person strives through their own will and effort to perfect their own innate potential. The emphasis is not in creating a superior being, but on completing oneself.
Having explored the internal philosophy, we must now pivot and confront its antithesis.
For as long as Freemasonry has pursued its quiet, internal work of self-improvement, it has been shadowed by a loud and persistent history of external accusation. Powerful institutions, chiefly the church and the state, have long perceived it not as a philosophical school, but as a dangerous and subversive threat to their authority.
The intensity of this opposition can hardly be overstated. Consider this quotation from a pamphlet circulated in 1744. The anonymous author declares that Freemasons are worse than all other perceived enemies of the Church combined, and that by their oaths they have offered themselves to the devil, thereby securing their eternal damnation. This is not nuanced criticism. It is a declaration of spiritual warfare, reflecting a deep-seated and visceral fear of the fraternity's secrecy and perceived heresy.
The attacks against Freemasonry were not arbitrary. They were consistently structured around four main pillars. Firstly, religious heresy. Its inclusivity, its acceptance of men from different faiths, was interpreted as religious indifference, or worse, atheism. Secondly, political subversion. Its secrecy and private oaths were seen as a direct challenge to the absolute authority of monarchs, a state within a state. Thirdly, accusations of moral debauchery were rampant, as imaginations ran wild about what transpired behind the lodge's closed doors. And finally, guilt by association. The fraternity was often conflated with any and all groups deemed heretical or rebellious, from the Knights Templar to the Calvinists.
It is crucial to understand that this was a calculated effort. The sources demonstrate that these were not merely popular rumors. They were weaponized and disseminated through the burgeoning technology of the printed pamphlet. This was a deliberate campaign of mass communication designed to incite public hostility and to pressure secular and religious authorities into taking action against the fraternity. In essence, it was an early and highly effective form of organized propaganda.
We have considered the thesis of Masonic philosophy and the antithesis of historical condemnation. This brings us to the synthesis, the tangible and complex reality of Freemasonry in the contemporary world. How does this institution, forged in secrecy and controversy, exist today?
Its existence is in many ways quite public. What we see here is the headquarters of the Grand Lodge of Turkey, located on a street in Istanbul. The name of that street, Nuri Ziya Sokak, translates as Street of the Divine Light. Let us pause to consider the significance of this. A society once forced into the shadows now occupies a public building on a street whose name echoes its own core symbolism. This represents a monumental shift from clandestine secrecy to public presence.
This public visibility is paralleled by an intellectual one. Freemasonry has transitioned from being solely the target of polemical pamphlets to becoming a legitimate subject of formal academic inquiry. Scholars in the fields of history, political science, and sociology now analyze its influence, its social structures, and its historical role not to condemn or defend it, but simply to understand it as a complex social phenomenon.
The scope of this modern research is remarkably broad. These examples, drawn just from the study of Turkish Freemasonry, illustrate the point. Recent doctoral dissertations have explored topics ranging from public perceptions of the fraternity in historical journals to its intricate connections with political movements like the Committee of Union and Progress, also known as the Young Turks. We have moved far beyond the simplistic accusations of devil worship into a sophisticated analysis of a complex historical actor.
One of the most significant insights to emerge from this academic turn is the realization that Freemasonry is not a monolithic, unchanging entity. It has evolved, adapted, and been reinvented within different cultural and national contexts. Perhaps the most powerful and important example of this adaptation is the emergence of Prince Hall Freemasonry in the United States.
Born from the exclusion of black men from established white lodges, Prince Hall Freemasonry became one of the oldest and most vital black institutions in America. It provided an essential framework for community organization, a platform for anti-slavery activism, and a vehicle for forging a cosmopolitan, transatlantic black identity. What is particularly fascinating is how its members consciously constructed a historical narrative that intertwined the progress of their fraternity with the broader struggle and progress of the black race. It was Freemasonry reimagined as a tool for liberation.
Having journeyed through its philosophy, its history of persecution, and its modern reality, we arrive back at our point of origin. We are left not with a simple resolution, but with an enduring duality that seems to be the very essence of the subject.
The narrative of Freemasonry is, and perhaps always will be, a paradox. It is defined by an internal, esoteric tradition dedicated to the quiet, methodical work of individual self-perfection. Yet this internal world is perpetually shadowed by a loud external history of being feared, misunderstood, and condemned.
This unresolved tension between the inner world and the outer gaze is not a peripheral detail. It is the central key to understanding the phenomenon in its entirety. And so, this historical and philosophical examination leaves us with a profound question for our own time. We live in an age that increasingly demands absolute transparency, an age that is often suspicious of any form of privacy or secrecy. Within such a culture, what value, if any, can be found in a private, symbolic journey into the self, a journey that, by its very design, must begin in a dark and solitary chamber of reflection? That is a question worthy of contemplation.